Genesis.
So raise your hand if you believe that you can invent your own language, have a huge following, and make billions of dollars off of that. Okay, for those of you who didn't raise your hand, would you be surprised if this is possible? Director James Cameron accomplished this by creating the language Navi. Navi is a fictional language that we can hear in his hit film, Avatar. I know what some of you may be thinking. What's so special about a fake alien language? Well, I'm here to tell you that Navi is thought to be the key that helped unlock the $2.7 billion Avatar franchise. In order for us to understand the fascination behind Navi, it's important to first discuss how Navi was created, second, how the actors learned the language, and finally, how it has impacted our American culture today. When director James Cameron set out to create the movie Avatar, he wanted to create his whole new language. First, he created simple words, and then he hired a professional to finish off the language. Cameron states in the LA Times, published in 2009, that the language started out with basic words. So he named characters, and then he named certain settings within the movie. According to Skywag, the reason why Cameron's new language was created was so that the audience could identify a relationship with the characters as well as relate to the Avatar race. According to a New York Times article published in 2009, Cameron talks about how he wanted the language to have its own phonetics and its own syntax in order to lend credibility to this new language. The Navi language came to full force when director James Cameron hired Dr. Paul R. Former. Dr. Former is a linguistics professor at the University of Southern California. He studied 16 different languages and has traveled the world all for the sake of his studies. Former started Navi off of 30 basic words that James Cameron handed off to him. As stated in an interview 5 Minutes with Paul Former, he talks about how he knew what the language would sound like based off of those 30 words. By the time the film wrapped, Navi had about 1,000 words, as stated on learnnavi.org, last updated May 2014. Now that we talked about how Navi was created, let's take a look at how it was then applied to the actors in the film. According to the interview 5 Minutes with Former, aside from the 4 years it took to create this language, Paul Former talks about how another challenge was teaching it to the actors. The first step was to meet with the actors a couple of weeks prior to a scene. In an interview done by the US Project, Former talks about how his experience was sitting down with the actors and teaching them this new language. He states, they had to learn their lines in a language no one had ever heard before, including making unusual sounds and sound combinations. And then they had to act convincingly in that language. So he would train the actors to not only memorize the language, but also how to pronunciate and how to master the stress and intonation so they could place emphasis in the correct place in their line. And then finally, Former would record the language and send it to the actors so they can replay it on their iPods. According to an NPR article published in 2009, Former mentions how he wanted the actors to dominate this unfamiliar language. By the actors repeating this and listening to it over and over again, it helped them memorize and pronunciate the language a lot better. Now that we're more informed to how Navi was started and what went into teaching the actors the language, let's look at how Navi has affected our American culture through websites, conferences, and day-to-day conversations. Now, just because Navi is fake doesn't mean it's unpopular. Even though it won't help you get a job, it still has a huge fan base. Many websites help you learn Navi. LearnNavi.org is the most popular website. It's run by a man named William Ans, and he occasionally meets up with Dr. Former to update the word guide on the website, according to Your Fantasy World Language, published in 2011. Aside from websites, there are also conferences all over the country where Navi is celebrated. According to the New York Times, Teach the Teachers is a really huge conference. It's held in California, and people from all over the world meet there, and sometimes the only common language among people is Navi. But the use of Navi doesn't stop there. It's grown so much that it's now spoken on the streets. According to the USO Project study, Navi was among one of the languages overheard in New York City in a study done in 2011 amongst 112 different languages. And now I just want to play a quick Good Morning America clip that shows how popular it's gotten.
chat rooms on Skype.
America.
But even with a new language, you can use the good old-fashioned way to converse, and that's face-to-face.
Caffè.
French. In New York, this group just met face-to-face after conversing in Navi.
Let me end by saying that Navi's like a tree. Its seed was planted by director James Cameron. Its bark grew with Paul Fulmer applying it to the actors, and its branches and leaves represents how it's expanded on our culture. The Navi fascination can be found amongst many different people and cultures, and by the looks of it, it's getting more and more popular each and every day.